Hey, what is going on, church? This is Johnny just hanging out with you today. As I've kind of expressed in the past, whenever we have a special speaker or maybe someone physically at church that's not me, then we kind of give you a pause on the series that we're going through online and we reflect on other scriptures. And today is one of those days. We have our beloved Jerry who is preaching here at church. So I would always love and encourage you to like check it out, show up physically. It's not just me. There are other pastors that preach here, and it's honestly a huge blessing. That being said, so today is one of those, we're going to take a pause on the series that we've been going through, kind of asking the question, what is church? Like, Jesus, why did you show up? What are you doing with us? And instead, we're actually going to turn to one of Jesus's teachings. And it's one that I think honestly, man, what this conversation may help you. It also might kind of cause you to go, I wish somebody had told me that sooner rather than later. And not that you would stop or change the direction of your life, but rather there's some of us I would say, hey, honestly, what I was taught at the beginning of my faith, yeah, that was not 100% what was going on. Let me explain what I mean. Okay, so we'll start off with I want to share with you guys a story about my own life. When I was back in the day, kind of transitioning between one place and another, meaning from one church to another. Sometimes pastors, you don't immediately get a position or a job. So what ends up happening? You end up getting a job somewhere. So in my case, I went to Amazon and I was delivering for them. And honestly, some of the wildest and craziest stories that I could ever share with you come from that experience. I wouldn't change it for the world to this day. Um, but there was a time when it was just kind of like getting physically taxing on it. When you guys think about it, an Amazon delivery driver can hand out up to 200 to 300 packages a day. That does mean that they are going to get out of the vehicle about 200 times a day. Think about what that physically does to your body. I know you're like, well, I go to the grocery store and I get in and out of the car, in and out of the house. That's four. Well, imagine doing that 200 times. It's a lot. It really is a lot. So I was just kind of like, God, what else? Like, I love Amazon, but is there anything else? And so there happened to be an opportunity. I was told by someone that there was a job opportunity within a warehouse for a coffee company. It's not the coffee company you're thinking of. It wasn't Starbucks. It was something else. And it was just a local roaster. And I was just like, why not? Let's go. So I go in, I have the conversation with HR. And as I'm having this conversation, the wonderful HR lady was like, hey, so why are you choosing to come here? And I was like, oh, well, told her the story working at Amazon, and it's fun, it's exciting, but it's also like very taxing. And so what did she tell me? She goes, oh, I understand. She's like, well, this position won't be that taxing. You won't be, at Amazon, I was lifting boxes one after another. Sometimes they're heavy, sometimes they're light, and then getting out of the car 200 to 300 times. And she's like, it's nothing like that. You're totally different physically. You're not going to be doing as much. And I was like, sweet, because it does. Honestly, guys, I understand. For those of you even like in construction, for those of you out there sweating, the sun beating down on you, doing like what's it called, landscaping, stuff like that, or just Amazon delivery guys. There's so many jobs out there that they're just physically taxing. To which I want to say, hey, thank you for what you do, and two, way to go. Okay, just way to go. So then I'm like, I'm set. Yes, let's do this. And the lady goes, hey, the position is yours. I'm like, yes. And I'm signing paperwork. Do you want to know what I did at that job? I was given the task to measure out all the coffee. So I have to measure out a certain amount of pounds of this coffee, that coffee from different locations around the world. And then I have to haul all these buckets. Now you're thinking little bucket. No, I'm meaning trash can size buckets full of coffee over to the roaster. Or I would have to grab 100-pound bags and drag them from one side of the facility to the other, closer to the roaster, so that the roaster could have everything that he needed. Then I had to climb inside the roaster itself and clean it with a vacuum, making sure all of the coffee dust that was coming off of the beans after being roasted was all cleared off. And then I had to grease the machine. Do you remember that part where the lady was like, oh, it's not that bad? That was a lie. That was such a lie. I was physically, every day I was sweaty. Like at Amazon, like you get a little sweaty, sure, but this was like drenching. You would have thought I ran like 10 miles. And it was just seriously, like after the fact, I was like, that woman lied to me. Like this is the most. I mean, the plus side, I definitely like was able to grow my muscles because I was carrying 100-pound bags every single day. All that to say this, I wasn't told the whole truth, and I'm not complaining about it by any means. It was fun working there, honestly. Again, another company, I wouldn't change anything. But what cracks me up is the she could have told me. She could have told me ahead of time, like, hey, so here's what the actual job entails, and then I could have made a decision from there. Like, ooh, so do I want to get out of a car 200 times a day with semi-heavy packages, or do I want to log around like the weight of a dead body, like from one side to another? I would definitely think about that. Can I tell you something? I have a very similar story to the one I just shared. It was actually about my faith. You see, when I came to know Jesus, I was told a gospel that said, when it comes to receiving Christ as your Savior, the point of receiving Jesus as my Savior is because I don't want to go to hell. Okay, so it was the to prevent hell. Give your heart to Jesus. That's a guaranteed salvation from here on in. Like, hey, you're set. You're good. Way to go. You're a Christian now, and now you have fire insurance. You're not going to be going to hell. Life will definitely get a lot nicer. You can pray. You can read your scriptures, and but for the most part, like hell is now being prevented. Way to go. And then I was one of however many got saved that day. And, later on there's a baptism. I got baptized. All that to say what? That wasn't the gospel. That wasn't even close to the gospel. No one told me um, that in order to follow Jesus, it would require something. Kind of like that job interview where it was like, hey, you told me like, hey, job's yours, great. Wow, we're just not going to tell you what it's actually physically going to cost. Today, I want you to look at a parable, and it's a parable that oftentimes when we read it, we don't actually understand what's going on. And I want to clarify something to you, and hopefully, you don't have a story like me that says I got lied to, but here we are. According to Matthew 25. It says this: at that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the groom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. And I want you to note 5 foolish, 5 wise. If that matters, I'll tell you in a second. When the foolish took their lamps, they didn't take oil with them, but the wise ones took oil in their flask with their lamps. When the groom was delayed, they all became drowsy and fell asleep. In the middle of the night, there was a shout, "Here's the groom! Come out to meet him!" Then all the virgins got up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise ones, "Give us some of your oil because our lamps are going out." The wise ones answered, "No, there won't be enough for us and for you. Go instead to those who sell oil and buy some for yourself." When they had gone to buy some, the groom arrived, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the rest of the virgins who also came and said, "Master, Master, open up, it's us." He replied, "Truly, I tell you, I don't know you. Therefore, be alert because you don't know either the day or the hour." Why is this story important? And what does it have to do with what I was sharing with you earlier? Well, first off, when we look at the story, we normally interpret it with our Western eyes, okay? So we look at it as modern day Western church folk, okay? We can't do that. The reason why is because we will interpret the story to mean things it does not mean. For example, we look at it and we just assume, oh, it has to do with salvation. Meaning there are some of those who are, Jesus is going to show up and some are going to be saved and some are going to be not. No, 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 no. Slow down, slow down. So far, Jesus has been warning the crowd. One, ignore the religious leaders because they may tell you what to do and what they tell you is actually right, but their hearts, they're not attached to me. They don't have a relationship with God. They think that they do because they have God facts, but they don't actually have intimacy with Him. That being said, Jesus begins to warn them that, hey, there's going to come a day when I return. There's going to come a day, the Lord's judgment day, the Lord's day, if you will, which is very much a reflection on the Old Testament, both Daniel and Deuteronomy. But here's a neat thing. As we start to look into these things, we realize that Jesus is expounding on something greater. He's talking about the kingdom, and he's talking about, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So why don't we look at the story? He begins by explaining a parable, right? And the parable looks like this. There are 10 virgins, and we have to pause and say, okay, what's going on? There's a wedding. Now, unlike you and I, when we think of a wedding, what do we think of? We think of a wedding meaning, somebody goes to a party, and then here comes all the people, and they bring all the presents, and then there's cake, and then there's dancing, and then, that's not how Jewish weddings works. Okay, so Jewish weddings are a lot more elaborate. One, they take several days, 7 days, in fact, and there's a certain kind of process to the ceremony. Normally, the groom would go to the bride's house because he's going to go get his bride. At the bride's house, he would then not only have the ceremony itself, they would exchange vows, right? Everything would happen there. As soon as the groom and the bride exchange their vows and the whole ceremony is completed, which, by the way, there's no set time as to how long this takes. It may take a little longer than expected. That's what's important. Knowing that, then the ceremony, once it's completed, the groom will then take his bride and come back to his house, where the party will ensue for the next several days. When he does that, that's normally evening, nighttime. It was the bridesmaids, there you go, that would normally be set up at the groom's house. They're ready, okay? And they would, be ready when he gets here. When he arrives, they are holding lamps. Now it's not a candle, okay? Rather, it's almost like Aladdin's lamp, okay? But not shiny. It's a clay pot that's kind of open like this. And right at the edge of my fingers would be a actual wick that just kind of sat. And in the bowl portion of it, there would be oil. You have to make sure you have enough oil. That's what keeps the wick burning, right? These bridesmaids would be standing there with their lights lit because it's evening, it's dark. They would all be standing in front of the doors, and they would all be, shouting, going, "Oh, here they come, here they come. They're so exciting." That's the way, that's the cultural information that you need to know in order to understand the meaning of Jesus' parable. So let's look at it again. Jesus says there are 10 virgins, not meaning anything having to do with their sexual activity. No, it means that these 10 women are at the age where they can get married. Okay, so these are young ladies, right? And they're the bridesmaids. Now pause right there. We assume that when we see a set of bridesmaids, we're assuming that all of these are friends of the bride. And for those of you who have gotten married, is this not an assumption? It is. There are some bridesmaids that just make it to the party because they're related, or maybe they're more closer to the groom or the groom's family. Like, there are dozens of reasons why they're there, okay? They may or may not be related to the bride. Very important to know. These 10 ladies are told, go wait for the groom and the bride because this whole ceremony is coming towards you. Again, it's probably late in the evening, but the ceremony doesn't have a time set, which means it may come soon or it may come later. Now we understand this. There are two types of ladies involved. And it's not a 50-50 thing. We're not saying at the end of all things that it's going to be straight 50-50. No. What Jesus is getting at is that there are those who are wise and those who are foolish. This is the point. The wise ones know, in the event that the groom takes a little longer than expected, we need to have extra oil so that our lamps don't go out because we're anticipating his return. Then there are the foolish ones that are like, hey, what matters is that, let's just go. And they're just going. They're not preparing. And they're not ready in the event that he takes longer than anticipated. In other words, they're not actually really engaged in the situation. That's what matters. So what happens? All 10 ladies are standing there. All of them have lamps. This is why this whole parable has nothing to do with good works or have you been, doing what Jesus asked you to do, or have you blah, 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 blah. No. The reason why? Because if it has to do with works, well, all the ladies have lamps. If it has to do with like strictly salvation, do you have a lamp? Do you not? All the ladies have lamps. You get what I'm saying? Don't superimpose your ideas on the scriptures. Let the scriptures interpret themselves. So we're going to put those two ideas aside. Let's focus on what Jesus actually means. All these ladies are where they're supposed to be. They're all anticipating at some point in the evening the groom will show up. What ends up happening? He takes too long. As a result of taking too long, they are now running out of oil and they all fall asleep. They're tired. It's late into, chances are normally the groom would show up pretty late, but at this point we're talking midnight. So around midnight, all of a sudden, now we hear, sorry, had to wipe something off of there. Now we hear that something's going on, right? The groom shows up. There's an announcement. He's here. And everyone is, okay, grab your stuff. The ladies grab their lamps, and the wise ones, they're ready. They have extra oil. The foolish ones are standing here going, oh my gosh, I'm going to run out. Let me have some of yours. And that's the point. You can't have somebody else. Somebody else's intimate relationship with Jesus is not going to count for you. And I'm starting to hint at what the point of the story is. So what do the ladies do? It's complete, by the way. In Jewish context, when people knew there was a wedding, stores would purposely be open late because they knew in case you need something, you're going to come get it from us. We would much rather be open and make some money. So they say, listen, those other ladies, why don't you girls go buy some extra oil and then come back? In the process of going to go buy the oil, they take too long. The groom shows up. Everyone goes into his house. Boom, the doors are shut. And when the ladies get there, they're knocking on the door. Oh, please let us in. And what does the Lord respond? I don't know you. And I want to highlight something very clear. In the original language, it doesn't say, I don't know you anymore. This is not saying that these ladies had salvation and they lost it. No. He's saying, I don't know you. In other words, these are bridesmaids that he does not have any sort of knowledge of who they are. He doesn't have their friendship. They ended up, sure, in the party, but it doesn't mean that the groomsman knows them. That's my point. The groomsman, or the groom rather, he doesn't have a relationship with those ladies. They're not his friends. That's my point. When I gave my heart to Jesus, I was told that it was for fire insurance. What people didn't tell me, what they should have told me, and this is what the parable is trying to say. One, when it comes to following Jesus, you want to know what it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you everything. Two, you have to be ready, no matter what. It's been 2,000 years since Jesus' appearance. And I know some people are already like, it feels like he's never going to come back. That's not the way that we should be thinking of this. In fact, rather, we should be thinking we are 2,000 years in debt. In other words, that's a lot of time to go by. And he could show up at any moment. For those of us who have chosen to follow Jesus, we realize what we should have been told is that give your heart to Jesus. But let me be clear. If you do that, you are saying that you are giving your whole life over to the Master. You are giving your whole life to the Savior of the world. You're giving your whole life to the one and only, the righteous one, Jesus of Nazareth. And what is it going to require? Everything. Absolutely everything. There's no part of your life that is your own. There is no, when it comes to your home, none of that is yours. It's now his. Your life itself is now his. Your finances are now his. The way that you carry about yourself is now his. Your children, they're his. Your life span is now his. Your purpose, your agenda, your goals, your aspirations, all of that is now under the leadership and rulership of Jesus of Nazareth. What does that mean? Well, if somebody had told me that, then I probably would be looking back at life going, well, I wish I knew because there were really hard times in following Jesus. Yes, that's the other thing. Jesus said, if you choose to follow me, it's not going to be easy. And it's not always going to be rainbows and sunshine. And it's not always going to be lovey-dovey. And some people are going to hate you. Some people might even want to kill you. Some people may choose to literally kick you out of their lives because you are standing for truth in love, but still truth. Jesus is telling everyone, listen, it's your choice. You want to be wise or you want to be a fool. If you're wise, you're saying, I know what it's going to cost me to be a part of the celebration of the groom. I have been prepared for this. I have anticipated his return. I know what it's going to take, and I am okay with it. Whatever the cost is, I'm ready. And for others who are foolish, can I tell you what that looks like? That's the Christianity of today. The Christianity of today says, listen, your job is to believe the right things about Jesus and to go to church. But to have an intimate relationship that is now on you, no, no one tells you that. No one tells you that it's going to require you the discipline of spending time with him intimately. It's going to require you to fall in love with him day after day after day. It's going to require hours of prayer, hours of getting to know Jesus intimately. It's going to require never being concerned about position, status, or power. It is going to require letting yourself die daily. It is going to require a surrendered heart. It is going to require humility. It is going to require sacrifice. It is going to require a constant state of thankfulness. It is going to require the ability to sing and praise him even when life sucks. Do you get what I'm getting at? We can know facts about God, never actually know him intimately. But then again, our Christianity doesn't say it requires discipleship. It doesn't say that it requires intimacy with God. It just says make sure you stay out of hell and make sure that you pray the prayer. But anything beyond that, not required. Jesus would say otherwise. Today, my hope and prayer is that one, you make the decision to follow Jesus plainly. But two, I want to make it very clear. It's going to require everything. And if you've already chosen to follow Jesus and you're like, dude, I'm a year into this or 10 years, or in my case, I'm almost 20 years into this, remember, it's going to require everything, even at this stage of the game and beyond. I don't want to lie to you. It's going to require everything. But that is the most beautiful relationship that I have ever had in my life. The greatest relationship I've ever had in my life is with Jesus of Nazareth. Grace and peace be with you guys. I hope you make that decision today. Remember, this is the way. See ya.